So we now come to a section in chapter 5 that is maybe a little bit more relatable compared to some of the statements that we recently looked at, which is pointing to kind of very advanced states of practice, and so maybe a little bit hard for us to relate to. But nonetheless, I feel that every Vajra statement is relatable, no matter what level of our practice. If we know how to kind of figure out what is the take-home lesson, then it becomes relatable. You know? Vajra statement 521 says, in mantra, meaning in Vajrayana, disciplined conduct is indispensable. Here it means sila, ethical conduct, moral ethics is indispensable. And this is in response to people claim that since mantra is the intention of Vajradhara, the intention of the sage, namely Vinaya, is not necessary. So this is addressing those who draw mistaken, from Gyalpa Rinpoche's perspective, a mistaken line between Buddha Shakyamuni, here called the sage, and Vajradhara over here. And this really follows from previous statements that look at, there is Nirmanakaya here, there is Sambhogakaya here, there is Dharmakaya here. Dharmakaya, very, very profound, whatever Dharmakaya is doing or teaching. Sambhogakaya, middling profundity. Nirmanakaya, Dharma for dummies. Then Buddha Shakyamuni is treated like that. So in the earlier statements it says, all kayas contain all kayas. Buddha Shakyamuni is not just Nirmanakaya. The aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni where he can be seen, he can be heard, he can be touched, that aspect we call Nirmanakaya. The aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni that cannot be really fathomed, cannot really be experienced by ordinary beings, that aspect we call Sambhogakaya. The aspect or the mode of Buddha Shakyamuni that is unchanging, no matter what, no matter whether he's physically present or physically absent, no matter whether you can perceive him or you cannot perceive him, that aspect is called Dharmakaya. That aspect is Vajradhara. But for some people, they differentiate. So they say, since the essence of what Buddha Vajradhara teaches is mantra of Vajrayana, therefore, for those of us who practice Vajrayana or mantra, secret mantra, we don't need to follow all those rules given by the Nirmanakaya Shakyamuni. The Vinaya, things such as the 5 precepts or the vows of monks and nuns, that's just the essence of Shakyamuni, the Nirmanakaya. It only applies to people who are practicing Hinayana. Now, us, Vajrayana practitioners, we don't need that. So here Gyalpa says, no. In mantra, disciplined conducts, specifically disciplined conduct as taught and as articulated in the Vinaya is indispensable. Of course, by now, this is not surprising to you. Or I hope not. Yeah. Otherwise, it feels like, the failure of the teacher. After almost 1 year, you go, what? Really? If your response to this statement is, what? Really? Then I have to fire myself. Now, let's look at Chodra's commentary. Yeah? Because the vows have a support, or need a support. Because vows cannot just float around. They need a basis. And now, of course, that basis needs a basis, and that basis needs a basis, right? So this is, again, that view of the levels of teachings, not so much as a road that you go from here to here, but rather a building whereby the foundations lead to the next floor, to the next floor, to the next floor, to the next floor, and at no point can you say the floors that came before is no longer relevant or important. No, not at all. Even as you rise higher and higher, you're always dependent on what's lower. So here, because the vows have a support, need a support, it is necessary to obtain the pratimoksha, bodhisattva, and mantra vows in succession. Yeah, so the pratimoksha, which here is referred to as disciplined conduct or Vinaya, that is the individual liberation vows. Then bodhisattva vows, then mantra vows, and these are to be developed, here called obtained. But it's not obtained in the sense of like, you get it from someone. You can say obtain in the sense of the formal ritual of committing yourself to training in these vows. That you can obtain. So through a ritual, you obtain the vows. But ultimately, the vows and the power of the vows, you only obtain if you develop them within your own mind, your own self. In particular, when the mantra path is bestowed, it is appropriate to be endowed with the two vows. And in that regard, it is necessary to bestow the summarized form of the vows of refuge and resolve for awakening at the beginning of the empowerment. And so it says, therefore, if you go to a proper empowerment ritual, before empowerment, remember, is the gateway to mantra practice, and the door to mantra practice. So here, Chodra points out, and therefore it's not coincidental and it's not just a matter of ritual, that when you receive empowerments, first, the refuge and the bodhisattva vows are given. Refuge represents the pratimoksha vows, then the bodhisattva vows. So they are given in a summarized form. So the Hevaja Tantra says, first they offer the sustenance and purification ceremony. Until then, they should begin with Hevajra. Not until then, but until then they should begin with Hevajra. Maybe that until is not necessary. First, they offer the sustenance and purification ceremony. Then they begin with Hevajra. So this is the Hevaja Tantra, a very important Tantra that says, first, sustenance and purification, that refers to the beginning levels of training. So Hevajra says, first you train in that, before you start training in Hevajra. Moreover, in the Kala Chakra, the Vajra essence commentary, and so forth, the supreme, average, and lowest Vajradharas are differentiated as fully ordained monk, novice, and householder. And the Vajrasikara Tantra says, there are the vows of Pratimoksha, of the Bodhisattvas, and of the mantra Vidyadhara. And so here, Choda is just quoting various different tantras to show that all the preceding two levels of vows are necessary in order to properly engage in Vajrayana or Mantrayana practice. And in fact, in Kalachakra Tantra, the Vajra Essence Commentary, and places like that, it says that the three levels of practitioners, here called Vajradharas. Here, this meaning of Vajradhara here is talking about those who practice the Vajra vehicle. Dhara means hold. Those who hold the Vajra vehicle. It says that the supreme holders of the Vajrayana tradition are fully ordained monks and nuns. Then the middle ones are novice monks and nuns, and then the lowest are householders, according to the Kala Chakra. But, people have this idea, the householders are the true Vajrayana people. Monks and nuns, those are just, Hinayana types. Not according to the Kala Chakra. According to the Kala Chakra Tantra, the best type of Vajrayana practitioners should be fully ordained monk or nun. Here, best, middle, and low, it's not a basis for, giving rise to pride, I'm a fully ordained monk and nun. I'm the supreme Vajrayana. And here, supreme, really, if you really try to understand what it means by supreme, average, and lowest, is to say the one who is most likely, right, to produce results are those who practice Vajrayana protected by the full extent of the Pratimoksha vow. Maximum conditions. Maximum conducive conditions is provided by having the fully ordained monks and nuns vows. Kala Chakra Tantra says that. Moreover, the Manjushri Mula Tantra says one does not accomplish mantra with lax conduct. There is no difference in the training in what one must guard against, except for the slight difference in the signs, such as robes, and in the ritual for obtaining the vows of the full monk Vajradhara and householder Vajradhara. And so here Choda says, in terms of what you have to guard against, what you have to practice, and what you have to avoid, there is no difference between a monastic Vajrayana practitioner and a non-monastic Vajrayana practitioner. The only difference, he says, is the minor differences such as a monastic Vajrayana practitioner is obligated to wear the robes, the monastic robes, whereas the householder Vajrayana, no. And also the ritual, whether you have participated in the ritual of ordination as a monk or nun or not. But insofar as what to avoid and what to cultivate, it's the same. Statements to come will further elaborate on this. So quoting the Subahu Tantra, concerning the pure disciplined conduct of the Pratimoksha, the Vinaya training taught by me, the victor, the mantra householders abandon signs and rituals, but all the remaining aspects are to be practiced. And so here to give a quote for that statement, that the only difference between householder Vajrayana practitioners and monastic practitioners is that householder practitioners do not need to maintain the external look of a monk or nun. But otherwise, everything else is the same. So specifically later we will see, abandoning the 10 non-virtues and practicing the 10 virtues. It says this is equally the same, no matter what level of practice, what level of vows we're talking about, it is the same. So to elaborate on 521 is 522. In addition to teaching that sutra and mantra are both disrupted by desire, he maintained that they are one. This is in response to people who say, it is taught that mantra is accomplished by practicing desire. So there are those who say, mantra or Vajrayana or Tantra, especially the word Tantra, as people joke, it's not safe to Google the word Tantra if you're at work. Because it will pull up all kinds of things that will get you in trouble if you're at work. Not safe for work. Because, a lot of, people think Tantra is about sexual desire. So Kyopa Rinpoche here says no. Whether it's Sutrayana level or Tantrayana level, desire is an obstacle. Disrupted by desire, that's what it means. Your training in Sutra and your training in Tantra will be disrupted. If desire is not handled right. So commentary. Even if you have understood the meaning of the previous Vajra statement, here let me summarize that through the intention of inverterate prohibition and inverterate permission, meaning, right? Inverterate means like it cannot change, What the Buddha prescribe and what the Buddha proscribe. So here translated as permission and prohibition. I don't like permission and prohibition so much. Permission and prohibition sound like, a parent. Oh, you are permitted, you are prohibited. Sounds like the government saying, you are permitted, you are prohibited. I like better. I think it's better to use medical terms. To prescribe and to proscribe. Right? To prescribe is the doctor says, for this illness, for the condition that you have, you should do this, and this. Proscribe, you should not do this, and that. So it's not that the doctor has given you permission, or it's not that the doctor is prohibiting you from, because that's not how it works. The doctor doesn't send nurses to spy on you or to punish you if you do the prohibited things, to reward you if you do the permitted things. No, the doctor is simply saying, yeah, if you want to get well, then stay away from this and do more of that. So permission and prohibition has more a sense of like force. Buddha doesn't force anyone. Buddha prescribe, Buddha proscribe. So here, so he's saying, through the intention, again, this is an awkward expression, but the Tibetan is intention, but here it means like meaning. Through the meaning, through understanding the meaning of how what the Buddha prescribes and proscribes never changes. Inverterate. It never changes. So through understanding that meaning, then it is taught that in order to abandon the extreme of indulging in sense pleasures out of desire, sense indulgence is not prescribed, except in minor instances of frugality. So if one receives something and thinks that it is permissible because one enjoys it without attachment, one still must be content with whatever is permitted. And so here it's saying, even if it is something that the Buddha says, it's okay. Right? So Buddha says, for example, Buddha definitely will say, yeah, it's okay, to eat tofu. And then it says here, and then you enjoy it, right? But even that, right? Don't, go, tofu, tofu, tofu. Or elsewhere, Buddha says, even meat, if you did not, see it being killed for you, know that it is killed for you, then it's okay to eat it. But even that, it should not, I like so much, I want so much, and think there's no fault. Of course there's fault. Even if, eating chocolate, like we say, maybe they say it's good for your health. Yeah. Even that you should not. Chocolate, this is so good, because then it becomes a fault. Moreover, concerning the enjoyment of the sense pleasures without attachment, in the state of the two stages of mantra practice, it is taught that the external sense objects, such as visible forms, are by nature the female deity. Furthermore, as it is important that these objects are necessary as offerings to the deity, one indulges in enjoying them without attachment. However, one is not to indulge out of desire and longing. And so here Chodra is saying, so yes, in Vajrayana practice, we do not like blot out or cancel out beautiful things, good smelling things, tasty things. We don't do that by suppressing. Because one approach to kind of handling desire is to suppress. To look at things and say, that thing that I instinctively think is beautiful or tasty or smells good, I have to think, actually, when they start rotting, they are not good, they're bad, It says, yes, in Vajrayana, and when you are training in Vajrayana, you don't do that. Instead, whatever you see is beautiful, you say, you recognize, that is Tara. Whatever you smell that smells good, you say, this is an offering to the deity. So that is what you should be doing. So when Vajrayana says, you can, because some Vajrayana texts say that, you can take desire and transform it. What it means here is transforming it. It means not like trying to paint over what you think is beautiful and make it ugly. And what you think is desirable, turn it into undesirable. But rather, what you think is desirable, now elevate that. Elevate that. And make that into an offering. So in the questions on Vajragarbha, question, Exalted One, what is impure? The Buddha instructed, the 5 sense pleasures such as the visible. Why? Because subject and object appear. So here is a definition of impure. Often we think of pure and impure in terms of like clean and dirty, good and bad. Yeah. Here the Buddha gave a definition of pure and impure as, is there duality or not? Is there subject and object or not? Once there is subject and object division, it becomes impure. So in other words, like even with desire, right? Desire arises because we have objectified something. As we say these days, to objectify someone, to objectify something, to objectify a gender, to objectify a race, or objectify, to turn it into an object of hate or an object of desire. All of that is due to subject and object. But when we understand and recognize, whatever that we see as out there is really a projection of in here. Covering over. The minute we understand that completely and thoroughly, then attachment and aversion collapses. We know that it's our own projection. Other people are not responsible for your feelings. Other people are not responsible for your anger. Other people are not responsible for your desire. Other people are not responsible for your expectations. Other people are not responsible for your happiness. And other people are not responsible for your suffering. Again, footnote, this you only apply to yourself, okay? Don't tell other people. Don't expect me for your feelings, to be responsible for your feelings. Then we become jerks, not Buddhas. We become assholes. I'm not responsible for how you feel. Especially those of you who are, who have like lifelong partners or long enough partners. I'm sure at some point in some of your fights, you have used that before. I'm not responsible for how you feel. Say that enough times, you're just an asshole. Not Buddha. It's a big difference. With regards to training ourselves. Not beating ourselves up, okay? Training ourselves. We say, other people are not responsible for my feelings. Other people are not responsible for my happiness and suffering. It's in my own hands. See the value of that and train with that. Yeah. Moreover, the large Prajnaparamita Sutra says, if being born in the world of Brahma is hindered by desire, one need not mention nirvana. So meaning, even being born in the higher realms within samsara, desire is an obstacle. So even if you want to be born in the higher Brahma realm, like the formless realm, desire is an obstacle. How much more if you want to achieve nirvana, desire is an obstacle. Concerning necessary and very important issues that are certainly of benefit to others, such things are not prohibited in all three vehicles. First, the Vinayakarika says, the bhikshu who accepts silver and gold commits a fault. However, for clothing, provisions, and for dharmic purposes, you must always accept it. And so here it says, even though, in the Vinaya there are specific statements, specific rules that says a monk or nun should not handle silver and gold. The literal wording. But here it's saying, but, if the silver and the gold is offered by someone for the purposes of providing clothing and provisions and for purposes of spreading the Dharma, then you should accept it. Furthermore, on the occasion of practicing the resolve for awakening, the Sanjayagata says, furthermore, if he enjoys the resolve for awakening without the attitude of the Arhats and Pratyeka Buddhas, such a Vira is to be known as one who continuously remains in equipoise, even if he engages in the five sense pleasures of sound, form, sound, scent, taste, touch. So here it is. Moreover, to elaborate, if a bodhisattva, even though he indulges in the five sense pleasures, apprehends omniscience, taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, thinking I will achieve Buddhahood, this is known as skillful dwelling in the perfection of disciplined conduct. Moreover, Bodhicayyavatara says, having understood that one should always strive for the benefit of others, the merciful one has, out of farsightedness, permitted them those things that are otherwise prohibited. So here, Chodra is further elaborating and say, yes, there are places in the sutras and tantras where it talks about, where it uses the language of indulging in the sense pleasures. And it talks about, the Buddha permitting things that otherwise are prohibited. But we should not misunderstand what this means. Because the bottom line is still, are we getting involved with these things? Or when we get involved with these things that are normally proscribed, right? Like sense pleasures, normally proscribed, as in Buddha points out. These are the faults of sense pleasures. So it says, even now, apparently it says bodhisattvas can get involved with sense pleasures if it is for the benefit of beings. Now that is the crucial point. If it is for the benefit of beings. So is it or is it not? Probably most of the time it is not. Be careful, don't use that and fool yourself and say, oh, for the benefit of beings. So I was watching some documentary, and this is a very extreme case, of course, You all heard about Rajneesh, right? Osho. A brilliant man, like if you read some of his writings, his mind is so sharp and he's so funny, but also mind is so sharp. Brilliant man. But everything, came to a crash. So interviews that have been done, and there's a documentary called The Wild Wild West, I think, on Netflix. Recently, there was another kind of feature of it on BBC. I was listening in the morning, talking to one of the people who was involved with him earlier on and then left before things got too crazy. And this person said, yeah, when the first Rolls Royce turned up for him, he said, I was thinking, yeah, why not? I mean, he deserves it, and he didn't like force people to get it for him, one of his disciples really wanted him to be comfortable, and it'll be beneficial, if he's more comfortable, then he can, do even better. He says, when the first Rolls Royce turned up, and then he goes like, and then when he died, there were 99 Rolls Royce. Yeah, when he escaped, not died, he had to run away from the United States. There were 99 Rolls Royces. Really? For the benefit of beings? How can it be? How can that be for the benefit of beings? 99 Rolls Royces. So, we have to be careful, Moreover, when practicing mantra, in the authorization rite of the empowerment, when the offerings are made to the deities, the Vajramaster says, from today onward, you, son, should indulge in such sense pleasures as of sound, form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So in some empowerment ritual, there is a statement like that. And the Vajramaster says to the disciples. And this is when offerings are made to the disciples. Now the disciples, right, in an empowerment, what happens is the disciple is now said, introduced by the Vajramaster to their divine nature and said, now you are deities. In fact, all along you have been deity. You have only forgotten it. Then in that context, the ritual assistant will hold symbols of the five senses and offer, like make a ritual offering to the disciples. And at that point, the Vajramaster says, from today onward, you, son, you, all of you, should indulge in such sense pleasures as of form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. But again here, he says, don't think suddenly the Buddha says, oh, there's no fault in desire. There's no problem with desire. No, it is saying now, your relationship to the sensory world needs to change. Briefly, if they bring an impediment to dharmic activities, sense pleasures are invariably prohibited in all the three sets of vows. However, if they aid dharmic activities, the sense pleasures are invariably permitted. So it's not. So what it's saying here is that it is not that Buddha at first said, don't do this. That Buddha at first proscribed it, and then later changed his mind and prescribed it. It is saying that from the start, it is already prescribed. As in, this new way, new to the trainee, of relating to sensory experiences, which is, if there are sensory experiences that you can take that will enhance your benefiting others, the Buddha has never proscribed that. In fact, the Buddha has always prescribed that and said, yes, you do that. So it's not something new, that only on the Vajrayana level suddenly the rules change. It has always been the case that the Buddha said, if these sense experiences can actually enhance your Dharma practice, then it's always been good, Whether in the Vinaya vows, whether in the Bodhisattva vows, whether in the Vajrayana vows, it has always been prescribed, or it's always been encouraged. And that which is harmful, it's always been discouraged. It's always been proscribed. Now, the absence of any occasion for permission or prohibition, where the realization of the non-duality of object and antidote is called conduct free from proliferation, is the most supreme tenet. But what I have explained above is something that concerns those who have not realized that. Chodrat says, and then there is a higher level due to a higher level of realization, where you actually do operate on a level of no distinction between subject and object, then the afflictive emotions cannot harm you. And so they are not faults. And in fact, they are no longer afflictive emotions. But he says, but that level, is so at Buddha Shakyamuni's level, that we're not talking about that here. You have not realized that yet, so don't worry about that. Sobish has, more like helpful quotations from the early commentaries that I think you can hear. Let's look at one of them by Dorje Sherab. On the physical book is page 484. Dorje Sherab says this: indulging in sense pleasures was taught with the intention that if people possess the power of the antidote, they may dwell amid sense pleasures, but like the lotus that is unsullied by the mud, their mental continua remain unsullied. In other words, they can be in the midst of sense pleasures, but they're not affected by it. This is 100 times, 1,000 times immeasurably more difficult than to abandon that which one must abandon through its antidote, and thereby to traverse the path as in the vehicle of characteristics perfections in the sutra vehicle. Based on such a practice, Buddhahood occurs in one lifetime, as in the case of King Indra Buddhi. Such practice is not talking about Sutrayana, talking about Vajrayana. That is the ability to dwell amid sense pleasures, but like a lotus, unsullied by the mud, the mind is not affected by the sense pleasures. Therefore, mantra practice, mantra vehicle, is like the edge of a knife. With the exception of the handle, wherever you hold it, it will cut. Similarly, if not using the handle of the unspoiled perfections, you take hold of mantra, you kill yourself and you deceive yourself. In mantra, one is harmed even by the tiniest subtle thoughts of desire, as in the story of King Indrabhuti and his sister. So what is this story? Accordingly, King Indrabhuti's sister accompanied her elder brother as a retreat servant when both had thoughts of desire for one another. Achaya Jalandhara appeared in the sky before them and scolded them, saying that their agitation was an affliction of desire. So apparently, even in the case of King Indrabhuti, before he finally was able to do that, there was a little bit of this problem, even between him and his sister. But it was one of his teachers, this Mahasiddha Jalandhara, appeared in the sky and warned them that finally he was able to purify. So Dorje says, therefore, in addition to the teaching that there is a disruption through affliction in all vows of mantra, the perfections and the Vinaya, all three of them also possess a single vital point. At the bottom of these notes, it says, the Bodhicayavatara says that things that the Buddha has otherwise prohibited, he has permitted to the Bodhisattvas. Moreover, on the level of mantra, a text says that, quote, from today onward you should indulge, unquote, which also marks it as a special permission. But actually, this is not special permission. This has always been permitted. It's just that we don't understand that. So in all these cases, the indulgence, quote unquote, I would say, the indulgence is only permitted when the practitioner is free from attachment. So maybe indulgence is too strong a word, at least in English. We can say the enjoyment. It is possible, according to this, to enjoy without having attachment. But of course, if we're honest about it, it's very hard to know where the line is. Yeah? To enjoy without being attached. So here, the enjoyment is only permitted when the practitioner is free from attachment, which is a tall order. If he is attached, it is impure due to dualization, due to having duality, and thus prohibited. So I would add here to say, enjoyment is not a fault. Attachment to enjoyment is a fault. Enjoyment is not a fault, and therefore, using his language, permitted by the Buddha. But enjoyment that involves attachment, that becomes a fault, therefore prohibited by Buddha. Enjoyment without attachment, and on top of that, becomes a way to benefit others, then the Buddha actually encouraged. Let's say, you have a gift of being a really good cook. And so then through your enjoyment of your skill of cooking for others, if you can do it to bring people to the Dharma, then Buddha actually would say, yeah, very good. Or you are very good with music. yes, according to the Vinaya, for example, a monk or nun is not supposed to indulge in music and dance. But if your music can be used to bring people to the Dharma, and you have no attachment to that music, then your enjoying it is something that the Buddha has always prescribed, has always encouraged. But on the practical level, is always, we have to remember, is not easy. How to have enjoyment without attachment. It is also, it's not just the issue of desire, all the afflictive emotions, although the issue of desire is most often discussed. But if you bring this discussion to the other obvious afflictive emotions, right? Then the equivalent for like anger, right? Or emotions related to anger, right? How can you have like fierceness, which we translate as wrath, right? Often. How do you have fierceness without having anger? Can you enjoy fierceness? Can you display fierceness without contaminating it with anger or aversion? According to this, it is possible, but not easy. So the bigger point here is that the Buddha's permitting or not permitting, don't think that the Buddha has changed his mind. And don't think that the Buddha is being partial, saying to a certain group, you cannot do this, you can do this. The Buddha's standard of what is helpful and harmful, what is to be encouraged and what is to be discouraged, what is to be prescribed and what is to be proscribed, has always been the same. And this is one of the key points. So then 523 explicitly it says, there's no occasion when through mantra or when, in the context of mantra practice, a non-virtue turns into a virtue. Like desire, Desire is always an affliction. But there's an aspect of desire that you can tease out that is, we call enjoyment. That is fine. But enjoyment and desire are always so closely bound, tied up. Yes, so what becomes, in another context you can say, in Vajrayana, there is a way to tease out, to separate enjoyment and desire, so that enjoyment, it has never been a non-virtue, enjoyment itself. It's attachment that is a non-virtue. So even in Vajrayana, when it seems like, oh, how come what is taught as a non-virtue in Vinaya is now virtue in Vajrayana? It said, no. Desire and attachment, no matter what yana we're talking about, is non-virtue. Even before the start of any yana, desire is non-virtue. It's naturally troublesome. So 523 very explicitly. states. So people claim that mantra is a path where one transforms the ground, meaning the afflictions with the 3 poisons somehow become good. And says, no, that's not what's going on here. What the Buddha taught as non-virtue, which is the afflictive emotions, they remain non-virtuous all throughout. But at more advanced levels of training, you can begin to zoom in and see that occurring alongside these non-virtues, there are some, you can say, virtues that are mixed in there. But not mixed in the sense of like mixed, but occurring side by side. That you can take one out and use that to your advantage. And always seeing where the fault is and abandon that. So adopt this, abandon this. Make sense? At least theoretically, make sense? Yeah. At this point, theoretically making sense, okay. Practically making sense, not so easy. Yeah. Practically making sense, not so easy. But it's helpful to know this, I think. Yeah, it's helpful to know this because then, I would say in how you can utilize this, even if you say, I'm not yet at that level, is that, yeah, it's sometimes, not like things that will bring a lot of suffering, small things, like chocolate, like pizza. Yeah, don't deprive yourself too much too early because it will backfire and you'll give up completely Dharma practice. But if you enjoy, you pay attention to that enjoyment and watch and see when does enjoyment get taken over by attachment. So what you're enjoying there, eating, and then if conditions change, right? And it becomes not enjoyable anymore, do you get upset? Do you get upset to the point of like snapping at people around you? If that is happening, then you can see, you see how quickly, how easily enjoyment involves, right? The afflictive emotions. Yeah. Questions, comments? I know there's been a discussion in the words prescribe and proscribe in Spanish.
Yes. Actually, prescribe and proscribe come from Latin, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but in Spanish, proscribe has the connotation of prohibition.
Mm-hmm.
You're an outlaw. You are proscribed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
In medical terms, we don't say prescription. Maybe we would say counterindication or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, in English, there is a difference between those two sets. Difference more in the sense of like what we call like semantic field. Meaning like these words are used alongside these other words in this context. And these words are used, right, alongside these other words in this context. So prescribe and proscribe is used in the medical context. Prohibit and permit is used in the legalist in the legal context often, the way these two sets of words are used contemporary. Of course, ultimately they are related, yeah, at least in terms of like these words in English. But the legally side, has a stronger, therefore, connotation of some higher power, right? Whereas the medical side of a medical term or medical vocabulary, at least in modern understanding, doesn't have the higher power judgment. More like, well, this is just the way things are, Although some of us still relate to the doctor as if doctors are God, So you can also say, encourage and discourage. What the Buddha has encouraged and what the Buddha has discouraged. And what the Buddha encouraged or discouraged, is based on him having seen the relative, benefit and harm of anything. And so what he understood as, what is harmful and what is beneficial, that has never changed. That has remained the same. So one analogy would be something like a parent will say to a child, don't. A parent, saying, not saying because, a baby cannot understand, but in a way saying, the parent saying to a baby, or a parent not giving a baby a grape. Right? Because the baby cannot, at that point, bite and swallow. The grape, if you give a baby, they can choke. But ultimately, the grape is not prohibited. Right? Grape is not prohibited. Is that particular shape given that circumstance? No. And so in a way, this issue is about seeing clearly what exactly is prohibited. Whereas something like arsenic, prohibited no matter. No matter what, prohibited. Baby or grown up. But we should not also think too much about this, because this is not an exercise in logic. I think this is really important. The way Kyopa Rinpoche gives these teachings, it's not an exercise in logic. And in fact, I think people were not obsessively writing down everything he said. And then comparing. To find logical inconsistencies and debate. That's not how it works in the Kagyupa. In Kagyupa, all these words, you take them seriously enough to affect a change in your behavior. A change in your way of relating to the world. That's enough. Yeah. In part, all these commentaries and later commentaries especially, because these original statements got dragged into a debate in logic, then later Gongchik commentaries have to try to play that game of logic. And so they will counter-quote and counter-quote. Because suddenly then these statements all have to undergo the scrutiny of the logic game. So sometimes Chodrak's commentary goes in that direction, because no choice, because these words got dragged into a philosophical debate, a logic context. Whereas in its origins, Kyoba Rinpoche did not give it for that reason, did not give these statements. In fact, he never imagined these statements even, compiled into this. It is Sherab Jungne, right? In wanting to, you could say, bring into focus, for all the disciples, before too much time have passed, when the memory of the Guru's teachings disappeared. Because, in a way you could say, there's no way for Sherab Jungne to tell whether the influence of Kyopa Rinpoche, how long is going to last. So there's a sense of urgency, right, when the teacher passed away, that he wanted to, if for nobody else, even for himself, to kind of encapsulate the uniqueness of his teacher's way of presenting things. So you can imagine, then he wrote these statements down. But not part of his plan or intention, these statements got carried into the debate tradition, the logic tradition, which is very strong too in Indian Buddhism, and then being transported into Tibet and developed in Tibet. Then suddenly, it kind of went into that context. So for us, we have to remember, what was Kyopa Rinpoche, most concerned about? Changing minds. And therefore, the style of his talking, the style of his teachings is also very different. And in a way, you could say there were poets and there were professors. Some were both. But generally, early Kagyupas, they are more poets. You all remember that scene from Dead Poets Society? Yeah, Robin Williams, right at the beginning, this new poetry professor, teacher comes in, and so everyone is studying poetry according to the rules. This part is this part, this part is this part, this part is this part, and he was like, throw away. Same, this early Kagyupa, the teachings are. But then later Kagyupas, also got into the anthology of, Kagyu poetry, and then start cutting them up. This means this, this means this, this means this, and this part is this, and this is this figure of speech, and that is that figure of speech, Then once you do that, then you are playing according to someone else's game. Then you can never win, I feel. Not that, anyone's trying to win, but some of them were trying to win, But the minute you let this turn into someone else's game, so to say, someone else's rules, you will never measure up to their. Okay, good. Chanchu Sem Chorim Poche ma ke pa nam ke gyu che ke pa nyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du bel war sho. Again, we now meet Mondays and Fridays in the morning, and then Wednesday is the Dugong Dhamma Kirti. Soon I'm going to ask Javier to send out an email to Dugong Dhamma Kirti. And I'm sure, many of you here who are involved in Dugong Dhamma Kirti, what you should do when you get that email is to send back an email and say, yes, I am still in. Because there's a whole bunch of people that sign up, oh, I want to be in, and then, I don't like this kind of messy, so I want to clean up that list. But, those of you who have been involved, all you need to do is to send back, respond to that email and said, yes, I'm in. I try my best to attend. Sometimes I cannot, which I understandable, but you have to, from time to time, say, yes, I'm still in. It's also a good way for people who are waiting for a way to say, no, I'm out, You got to make sure people know where the door is so that they can come in, but they can also leave, You don't want anyone to feel trapped. And also, you also don't want anyone to feel like they cannot come in. So the door and the exit, the entrance and the exit sign has to be clear. So from time to time, we have to make announcement. Okay, exit over there, And then outside, we can say, okay, entrance over here. Ta-ta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Good evening, good night, bye-bye.
Bye.